All right, so for rigging, a few tools you got to start out with. Good pair of scissors or a knife. A couple of pliers, nice to have, makes it a little easier. Wishbone insertion tool. Don't have to have this, you can pull it off with some pliers. Some wax cord is key. Obviously rubber for your bands if you're doing that. All right, so let's talk bands. Very first thing is probably figuring out, do you need new bands? Are you at a place where they're trashed and they're ready? First thing is you probably tell like they're kind of stretched out, they don't have the elasticity anymore, and they're also going to start to crack around the place where it ties off to your wishbone. So you'll start to see cracking, and if you see cracking, I say just replace it. You're already starting to lose some strength at that point. Next thing is you want to figure out band size, and the best thing is to stick with what you already have on there. The gun manufacturer or builder is going to build that gun and match the band strength and size to match the shaft diameter as well as the length of the gun and the kind of power that they believe that that gun should have. That's all kind of usually up to the builder and pretty well dialed in. So you don't want to change any of that stuff. And then, so to talk band sizes, so there's small ID bands, large ID bands. There's a lot of opinion about that. I really stick with small ID bands. They're a little harder to insert the wishbones, which we'll talk about in a second, but they just have a really good stretch to them, especially for rollers. And then there's going to be 14 mil, 16 mil, 18 mil, and if you're going really crazy, like a 20 mil. Typical, you're going to have 14 or 16. Your smaller guns are going to be 14 mil bands unless you're running one 16 mil band, which you're going to figure out exactly what you need for each gun. When I say ID, it's inner diameter. So the inner diameter hole that goes through the center of the rubber, that's where you attach your wishbone, where you insert it. And so the larger inner diameter, the less rubber you have in there. So you're going to lose some of that ability to stretch and pull. So that's the reasoning behind small inner diameter rubber. 14 millimeter, 16 millimeter refers to the diameter of the actual rubber that you're getting, the thickness of it. And typical wishbone should be roughly 3 inches. This one's almost 4. Really doesn't matter too much. You just don't want it to get crazy. If your wishbones are too long, you're losing band stretch and losing power. So you want to keep those pretty small. If it gets too small, it's hard to get on top of your shark fin tab. And if it's too long, losing power. So, and then to get the percentage of stretch, that really the ideal is about 350%. That's pretty tight, but it's typical gun builders are around 350. That's what they're factoring in as they build the gun and the way they designed it. Any less, it's easier to load, but you're going to lose power. You want to get around 350. I run mine sometimes 360, 370. Yeah, so you don't want to overpower a gun, because what happens, especially with an open track, is you start to have shaft whip. And so when the bands are too tight, the shaft can't handle that as far as the flex, and it starts to bend, and then that's going to throw off your shot. And so it's going to start to porpoise as the shaft leaves the gun. Less issue with an enclosed track, but you still can have that problem. Yeah, so let's talk about the math and the equation that goes behind figuring out the kind of length you need for the gun that you have.
Hey guys, wanted to cut away from the video really quick so that I could just clearly explain to you how we use this equation to come up with our band length. So what you're going to want to do is measure from the shark fin tab, where the wishbone will be meeting, all the way up to the front of the gun where the bands go into the gun, right? You're going to take that number and you're going to multiply by 2. Reason for this is because this band, right, is on both sides. So we need to equate for it coming down, around, and then back, since this is one band, right? You're going to take this length, multiply it by 2 to come up with the number. From there, you're going to subtract the wishbone length from that number, right? So in the video, we've been doing 3 inches. Then once you get that number, you're going to divide that by the band power percentage as a decimal, right? So if it's 350% you're using, that number is going to be 3.5. So you take that number, divided by 3.5, and you'll get the overall band length that you need to tie. Okay, now for a roller, this is going to be a slightly different. Reason is because as opposed to a traditional band where that one band is going on both sides, now we're tying two different bands that are going to be brought together by a wishbone on the bottom and on the top. So the way you're going to come up with this calculation is similar to a traditional band. You're going to start from measuring from the shark fin tab on the back of the gun. You're going to take that measurement all the way up to the front of the roller where the band goes into the gun. You're going to add then the overall length on the bottom of the gun, right? So from the top of this roller all the way to the farthest tab where it's going to mount. You're then going to subtract the wishbone totals, right? Now we have wishbones on the top and on the bottom, so a total of 6 inches. But we're going to be doing this twice, so you're really going to be doing half of the wishbone on the bottom and half of the wishbone on the top. So for each one, it's going to be a total of, right, if it's a 3-inch wishbone, 1.5 on the bottom, 1.5 on the top, or 3. So it's going to be overall length on top plus overall length on bottom minus 3 divided by 3.5, which is the band power percentage. Whatever that number is going to be the band that you're going to cut. You're going to cut 2 of those and connect those with the wishbones top and bottom. All right, back to the video.
So typically you can reuse these wishbones. They're usually not so thrashed, but if you start to see wear and tear along this top part here from connecting onto your shark fin tab, replace them. These look pretty solid, we could reuse them. And a great way to do that is just to cut the constrictor knot that is on here that's holding it on there. Just carefully cut that to where it releases, and you can pull that knot out of there. And with a roller, there's a few options that you can do. So some people like to have the bridle, and the bridle is basically a little handle that you can grab the roller with, so you don't have to have a load assist, so it's easier to grab. Some people like just the straight wishbone, and some people will tie the wishbone straight directly with 2 knots on each end, so it's real clean. Again, this is preference. There's no right or wrong, really. It's what you like.
What do you like?
I personally like the bridles because then it's easy just to grab. Even with gloves on, you can grab that thing and go, and it's a quick load. For the other end that's going on the bottom side of the roller, what I like to do is simply do just an overhand knot to tie the anchor part of the wishbone. So just a simple knot like that. Grab it with the pliers just to kind of cinch it down. And you're going to make one of these for each side. Cut it. Again, same thing, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, and then make sure you mushroom the end over. That helps it from sliding back through and any kind of issues, and it kind of helps when you're sliding this into the rubber. We need 2 of those. Actually, we need 4 of those because we're going to do the other part too. Yeah, making a ton of these, having these all ready to go makes it really quick. And these, you don't want these super long because the longer they are, the further they're going to stick out of your band. So if they're super long, they're going to take up more space and they're going to burn some of that 3-inch gap that you want for attaching to the shark fin. So typically if they're under an inch, it's good. This connection between the wishbones, as I mentioned, sometimes can wear out as it's connecting, as you're putting it on your shark fin tabs. So what's nice about doing it this way with these little inserts is you can replace this. You can easily untie it and replace it. And I'll show you how to cut this one. So you're gonna run this thing. Basically you can measure it as you go, like once you get it on there, but you're gonna melt the end of this. And there's 2 different ways you can do this. If you're nervous that you're not gonna actually melt it good enough, you can just put a little knot on there. And this is like full safety proof mode right now. Do just a little tiny overhand knot, push that down tight, melt that guy down, and this would be your connection point, right? So start coming up through the loop, give yourself enough line and wrap around the back and then up under that section of loop that you just created. And then what you do is pull down, and what it does is it keeps pulling tighter on itself and it keeps it from sliding through. And so another way you can do that without the knot is simply you make a big enough mushroom head on the end of this, and this is why you have to use Dyneema, because most other line doesn't do this, but it creates a little nug on the end. You're going to run that end of it through, all the way back around the back, and back through that little loop that you've just created. And then when you pull down on there, that little mushroom head of it keeps it from sliding through, and it's pulling down on itself. So really that's all you need. This is overkill if you're just not quite confident in what you're doing here, but this little mushroom head is more than enough to like keep that from sliding through. It doesn't slide through. I was skeptical at first many years ago, but it works. We use it on all our tuna guns and everything. So another thing you can check now is once you insert this into the rubber is going to come here and about here. So now we're about 4 inches. So if you ever needed to like shorten this, now all you got to do is push this back through. And if you need to take your bands off or whatever, you can just push it back through, take it off, and you can cut, a little bit off of there or whatever you want to do. Or even pull your band off if you need to replace your bands for some reason, or you want to take them off. It's an easy way to release it. So now let's actually rig this thing up. Let's get it going. Wax cord. You're going to use, again, this is something that can be preference as well. Some people will tie loops on the end so it's easier to hold on to, but typically if you have about 1.5 feet, you have plenty of line, plenty of wax cord there to do your constrictor knot. Is take your insertion tool, grab one of these little guys, and what I use is super top secret, don't tell anybody, food grade silicone. So Trident Dive Company, whatever, they make this stuff, but it's just silicone, and so it's good for the rubber, but it also, little trick is once you've sprayed the knot there, a little bit ends up on the table, put the end of the rubber on there like that, and push the knot in there, and it should just slide right in. You can see it slid in there. And then because there's silicone on there and because that's a little slippery, when you pull it out, it could just pull the whole thing out. So what I use is a nail, or you can use just something small, and you can kind of push it back in there to kind of keep it from sliding out. And now you have your wishbone inserted. So now we're going to tie a double constrictor knot. Some people use a single. I'm sure that works fine. So for this knot, you're gonna start about 2/3 of the way on it. Hold it with your thumb. You're gonna wrap around the back end and cross over. So you have this X, this little loop with an X. And then you do that twice. So you create another X, another line over that X right there. You can see that. Does that look good?
Yep.
And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna come back around this side of it, and over, this line's gonna stay down. You're gonna come over the top of that and go through the X. Right down the middle, through the center of that X right there. And here's the tricky part, is pulling them both tight, slowly, without it looping back out. And there's lots of videos on YouTube on how to do this, but this is the trick. You want, push it towards the end, roughly 1/4 of an inch away from the end. Some people leave a little less, a little more, whatever. But then this is where you throw your 2 pliers on the end, roll it so it doesn't slip, clamp down on there, and you'll see it start to pull tight. And then you gotta roll it a little bit more, and then get it up to your chest and give it everything you have. It takes a lot, but you want that thing super tight, and you just want to double check, make sure there's no more movement, and then you are cinched down. So then now what you have is a way to keep this from pulling back out. So you can test it, you can pull on it, you can start to see that knot that we had inside there is stopping behind there. And you always want to pull this and make sure it's nice and good. And then slice the ends off, leave a little bit hanging out that you can burn with your torch. Careful not to torch the rubber. Don't burn the constrictor, just make sure you're just holding that little end up and just torching that and then pushing it down, and that's it. Cool. And this is the point where some people will use a grinder and smooth that out, and but it's not mandatory. So that's what a tapered end would look like. And you especially want this on rollers. It's not mandatory again, but it also makes to where the band will roll through the rollers easier as it starts to come around that side of it. Kind of nice. Also helps with the sight picture if you do that on the top. So when you're looking down the gun, you don't see these flared out ends of your band. When it's tapered down, it cleans up your sight picture so you get a clearer shot. Okay, so now we're tying the bridle for the roller and continuing to do some constrictor knots. Oh, easy.
Crimp Dyneema.
Okay. So now what we're going to do is throw the bands on the gun. Okay. So there you can see the bridle. And then once you run it through, you're going to tie this end, that connection point if you need. All right.
Good.
Is that good? Good length?
Beautiful.
There's a million opinions as to how you should rig a gun and what's most effective. This is what works for me. Try some stuff out, figure it out, and find what works best for you. And maybe even like borrow a friend's gun if you want to try that and just see what works and see what you like and don't like, and start to figure out what works best for you.